The Tudors did not do chill. If someone crossed you at court, you didn't just shake it off. You plotted, you poisoned, and you waited. Revenge could simmer for years, decades even. And if you were lucky, it ended with your enemy in the tower. If you weren't lucky, you might be the one hearing the axe on the scaffold. This was a world where personal feuds became matters of state, and slights, real or imagined, could set entire dynasties wobbling. Today, we're going to dive into some of the best Tudor grudges, messy, spiteful, high-stakes rivalries that helped to shape the politics, religion, and the drama of the 16th century. So go ahead and grab your cup of coffee or your bottle of water, and let's settle in and talk about some of the biggest Tudor feuds. We're going to start with the Royal Showdown that lasted nearly 30 years. Hey friend, welcome back to the YouTube channel for the Renaissance English History Podcast. I am your host, Heather. I've been podcasting on Tudor England since 2009 with my show, which makes it the OG original Tudor History Podcast. Today we are talking about Tudor feuds, and we're going to start with one that lasted 3 decades. So that is Elizabeth I and Mary, Queen of Scots. Imagine being born with a claim to the throne and then being raised knowing that your cousin already has it. From the moment Mary Stuart came into the world, the rivalry with Elizabeth was just baked in. Mary, Queen of Scots, was Elizabeth's cousin, a Catholic, and crucially, a legitimate great-granddaughter of Henry VII. To Catholics in England and Europe, she was the rightful queen, and not Elizabeth. Because if you think about it, if you consider the marriage with Anne Boleyn to be unlawful, because Catherine of Aragon was still alive at the time, Elizabeth was born when Catherine of Aragon was still alive, making her the product of bigamy. And so Catholics who believed that marriage with Anne Boleyn wasn't valid saw Elizabeth as a bastard child. Now, Mary grew up in France. She married the heir to the French throne, and she became the queen consort very briefly before being widowed and returning to Scotland. But Scotland was not exactly thrilled to have her back, especially once she started making questionable marriage choices and annoying the Protestant nobility. When things started to fall apart, she fled south to England in 1568, hoping that Elizabeth would help her. Elizabeth did not help her. Instead, Mary was imprisoned for 19 years. This wasn't just a petty punishment. Mary had actually become a symbol. Catholic plots bubbled around her constantly. There was the Ridolfi plot, the Throckmorton plot, and finally the Babington plot, where Mary was very clearly implicated in trying to have Elizabeth assassinated. Even then, Elizabeth couldn't quite bring herself to execute her cousin. It was, a royal blood thing. Also, there was the tiny matter of not wanting to set a precedent that monarchs could kill other monarchs. That's a little bit dangerous when you're sitting on a contested throne yourself and, Spain's getting ready to invade. But in 1587, after months of hesitation, Elizabeth signed the death warrant. Mary was beheaded wearing red, the color of Catholic martyrdom. Elizabeth immediately claimed that it had been a mistake. She blamed her council, said she hadn't meant for it to go through. Sure. This wasn't just a rivalry between queens. This was a Cold War wrapped in velvet with religion, legitimacy, and power all tangled together. It actually haunted Elizabeth for the rest of her reign and made sure that her own heir, Mary's son James, had a very awkward family tree. The next one we're going to talk about is Thomas Howard versus Thomas Cromwell. So many Thomases. And these two, one born into one of the oldest noble houses in England, the other the son of a blacksmith, both deadly in their own way. Thomas Howard, Duke of Norfolk, was everything Cromwell wasn't. He was noble, he was a soldier, a proud Catholic. Cromwell, meanwhile, had clawed his way to the top as Henry VIII's right-hand man, organizing the break from Rome, dissolving the monasteries, making a fortune for the crown in the process. Oh, and also putting Anne Boleyn on the throne, much to Howard's advantage at first. The two men actually hated each other's guts. Cromwell represented the new order, reform, bureaucracy, meritocracy, at least theoretically. Howard was old-school nobility and saw Cromwell as a jumped-up nobody who didn't know his place. The rivalry played out in everything from court appointments to religious policies. Cromwell chipped away at Catholic traditions, Howard schemed to keep them. Things came to a head in 1540 when Cromwell arranged Henry's marriage to Anne of Cleves, part of a Protestant alliance. Henry was not impressed with Anne, and he had his own ego hurt at the time, and the marriage was annulled within 6 months. Cromwell's enemies pounced. Howard saw his chance and pushed his niece, the young and pretty Catherine Howard, into Henry's path. And Henry was besotted, and Cromwell was suddenly very much in the way. He was arrested June 1540, charged with treason and heresy, and executed in July. No trial, no mercy. But don't feel too bad for Howard, because his time would come. Catherine Howard would later be executed for adultery. The Howards fell out of favor not long after. Still, in the Howard versus Cromwell match, score one for the old guard, at least temporarily. Have to say, though, Thomas Howard, he was one lucky fella. You might know this story. He was actually scheduled to be executed later on in 1547 his son had flew the flag of the monarch, claiming it for himself. It was all just kind of silly, but, it was treason. And Thomas Howard's son was executed. Thomas Howard himself was scheduled to be executed. The only thing that saved him was Henry died. And so he was saved because Henry died just in time, like literally the night before. So Thomas Howard, he is one lucky fella. All right, next we're going to talk about another feud with Elizabeth. Elizabeth versus Lettice Knollys. Elizabeth could hold a grudge like it was royal policy, and when it came to Lettice Knollys, her own cousin, the gloves were off. Lettice was the granddaughter of Mary Boleyn, Anne Boleyn's sister. So yes, that made her Elizabeth's cousin. She was also beautiful, ambitious, and entirely too close to Robert Dudley, the Queen's longtime favorite and true love. After the death of Lettice's first husband in 1578, she secretly married Robert Dudley without Elizabeth's permission. When Elizabeth found out, she exploded. She slapped Lettice in public, called her the she-wolf, banished her from court forever. Dudley managed to worm his way back into the Queen's favor as usual, but Lettice was done. Cast out, persona non grata for the rest of her life. The feud didn't stop there. Lettice's son, Robert Devereux, the Earl of Essex, later became Elizabeth's new favorite, and then he ended up executed for treason. Coincidence? Maybe, but I mean, he did plot treason and plot a rebellion. But the Lettice-Elizabeth curse ran super deep. Next up, the Dudleys versus everyone. If there was one Tudor family with a terminal case of too much ambition, it was the Dudleys. It started out in Henry VII's reign with Dudley and Epsom, who orchestrated the king's very unpopular tax policies, and then Henry VIII had them killed to show that he wasn't going to rule like his father. If we jump on into the mid-16th century, we get John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland, was the mastermind behind putting Lady Jane Grey, his daughter-in-law, on the throne in 1553 after Edward VI died. That whole thing lasted 9 days. Mary reclaimed the crown and made sure Dudley lost his head. Then she executed Jane and Jane's husband. Basically, if your name was Dudley, you were on a very short political leash. John's son, Robert Dudley, spent the rest of his life trying to shake the family reputation. He got super close to Elizabeth, who adored him, but never quite enough to marry him. Too much scandal, too many whispers about ambition, and there was that, really suspicious death of his wife in 1560. That did not help at all. The Dudleys were always reaching for power, and just when they thought they had it, it would slip through their fingers every time. Now let's go back to the very beginning, Lady Margaret Beaufort and Elizabeth Woodville, before the Tudors even took the throne. After Richard III was defeated at Bosworth in 1485, Henry Tudor became King Henry VII. But his claim to the throne needed a bit of a legitimacy boost. Enter Elizabeth of York, daughter of Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville. Henry married her, uniting the houses of Lancaster and York, but this royal marriage also meant that two powerful women were now circling the throne. Henry's mother, Margaret Beaufort, and his mother-in-law, Elizabeth Woodville, who had been queen. Let's just say they didn't braid each other's hair. Margaret wanted control. She'd raised Henry. She fought for his crown. She styled herself as My Lady the King's mother. Elizabeth Woodville had been a queen. She expected respect that was due to a dowager queen. And she was pushed to the margins and eventually sent off to a nunnery. There's also the idea that she might have supported a rebellion against Henry VII, but that hasn't been proven. Either way, she went to a nunnery. Some say she also went willingly. She had lived a very dramatic life, so it might have been nice for her, but it certainly didn't help that things were weird between her and Lady Margaret Beaufort. It was a quiet feud. There were no open fights. There was no like punching in the Great Hall or anything like that, but you can see things through the record. These two women, the one who had been a former queen, the other who was the king's mother now, they could not share a court. So Tudor feuds weren't just about who got the last word. They shaped the dynasties. Behind every execution, every marriage, every rise, and every fall, there was usually a personal rivalry hanging in the wings. Whether it was queens banishing cousins, brothers sending each other to the block, or noble houses trying to claw their way back up to the top, the Tudor court was a drama factory with very real consequences. So which feud is your favorite? Which one would you have included that I did not include it? I would love to know. Leave me a comment and let me know. And if you made it this far in the video and you enjoyed it, you know what I'm going to say. I sure would appreciate to press that like button. It helps to feed that algorithm and get our content to more people. And I hope I earned your subscription to my channel where I put out content like this on the regular. If you want to dive deeper into these feuds, I've done full episodes on all of these individual people, but here's one on Lettice Knollys that's pretty recent that people enjoyed. You might enjoy that. Or here is a video that YouTube thinks you'll like. So remember, my friend, you are deeply loved. I am so glad that I share the planet with you. You make the planet a better place, and I'm glad we are here together. I will be back very soon. Thank you for spending your time with me today. And in the meantime, don't forget to drink your water, friend. All right, bye-bye.